Between Operation Battleaxe and Operation Crusader, Rommel is promoted to an army commander. Now, I'm going to do a follow-up video explaining why this happened, because it's quite complicated and it involves our favourite scheming general from the Second World War, Halder. But for now, let's take a look at the Axis order of battle for Operation Crusader and explain why the Germans had the advantage but blew it. Links and sources are in the pinned comment of the comment section below. Since this was an Italian theatre, we actually have an Italian general in charge of Axis forces, including Rommel's army. This is Ettore Bastico's North African Command, which is at Benghazi. Bastico had fought in the First World War and Abyssinia in the 1930s, and led the Italian force sent to Spain during the Spanish Civil War. So this guy had experience leading troops and governing provinces, since he'd also been the Governor-General of the Italian Aegean Islands. This places Bastico in a good position in terms of experience when he reaches Libya in July of 1941, replacing Garibaldi as commander of all Axis forces in North Africa. He's also made the Governor-General of Libya itself. Unfortunately, Bastico has also been described as difficult, autocratic and foul-tempered, which is why Rommel nicknamed him Bombastico. Rommel would mostly ignore him, having maintained good relations with Hitler and Mussolini, and so Bastico was effectively bypassed. In fact, during Operation Crusader, there's a bit of a command crisis as a result of this, and Field Marshal Kesselring is sent in to resolve the situation, the first real time he's involved in North Africa. Rommel, however, won't bow to Bastico or Kesselring, further straining the joint Axis command structure and German-Italian relations. Beneath Bastico's North Africa command is the star of the show, General de Panzertruppe Erwin Rommel's Panzer Group Africa. Rommel has Lieutenant General Gauss as his Chief of Staff, Lieutenant Colonel Westphal as his Operations Officer, and von Mellenthin as his Intelligence Officer. Rommel has already made a name for himself in the First World War, the interwar period, and in France in 1940. Ambitious, short-tempered, full of energy, and having a habit of leading from the front, excessively at times, which is perhaps a criticism, Rommel is one of the most well-known generals in the Second World War. Many books have been written on him, documentaries and films have been made about him, and there's even a Japanese metal band named after him. Rommel arrived in North Africa in early 1941 and dealt a heavy blow to the British in his first desert offensive. But by only having 2 Panzer Divisions at the time, and not all of them had arrived yet, Rommel wasn't able to take Tobruk. So Rommel couldn't advance further than the Libyan-Egyptian border, and had strained his logistics to breaking point. But if he could take Tobruk, that would give him another port from which he could strike further into Egypt. To take Tobruk, he needs reinforcements. But what might come as a shock to some of you, Rommel doesn't request more tanks. He requests more infantry, and he gets them. By the time of Crusader, Rommel is in command of 3 German divisions, 2 Panzer and 1 infantry division. And he plans to attack Tobruk on the 20th of November 1941. This means that when Operation Crusader starts on the 18th of November, Rommel has to make a choice whether to continue the planned attack on Tobruk or turn about and deal with the British offensive. But because of his stubbornness, the successful British deception methods, and a misreading of intelligence signals, Rommel uncharacteristically doesn't react at all. And when he does, he makes some really terrible decisions. So terrible, in fact, that he went from having the opportunity to annihilate the British to utter defeat and the loss of a third of his force. And it's mostly his fault as well. This is an entire debate in itself, and I want to explore that debate in the main Operation Crusader video, once we've seen exactly what happens during the battle. But if you subscribe to the view that Rommel was a great general and seemingly unbeatable, well, you should look at Operation Crusader, because this is the Desert Fox at his worst. With Rommel promoted to Army Commander, he's now in command of 2 corps. The first of which is the Duchess Africa Corps, Rommel's old command. A new general is brought in to take command of the Africa Corps, and that general is General Lieutenant Ludwig Cruewell. Cruewell had been a cavalryman in the Kaiser's army and had moved to the Panzerwaffe before the war. He commanded 11th Panzer Division in what was arguably the biggest tank battle of the Second World War, the Battle of Dubno 1941. Considering that Operation Crusader was planned to be a tank battle, because that's how the British wanted to fight it, and bearing in mind that the British generals themselves had no experience with tanks, the British were going up against Cruewell, a general who had more than enough tank-on-tank experience to beat them hands down. Again, what were the British thinking? But with all this tank experience, it is a shame that Rommel didn't listen to Cruewell during Operation Crusader. Cruewell gave some very sensible suggestions on how to conduct the battle, which may have won it for Rommel. However, Rommel being Rommel, he didn't listen to Cruewell, and made the situation worse by cutting Cruewell out of the command decisions several times. Rommel basically took over Cruewell's job and led the Africa Corps himself, which indicates that Rommel was having trouble adapting to the higher ranks of command. This action has been criticised, with Cruewell himself highly critical of Rommel's actions during Crusader. Cruewell's chief of staff was Oberst-Leutnant Bayerlein, a guy who later commanded 3rd Panzer Division, the Panzer Lehr Division, and took part in the Ardennes offensive. He helped out at the US Army Historical Division along with Halder after the war and was very influential on the history of the North African campaign. Cruewell is also a central character in North Africa, and yet no book has been written on him in English, and as far as I can tell, none in German either. But I do think a book should be written on Cruewell, because this guy performed better than Rommel in this battle. Cruewell's Duchess Africa Corps consists of 4 divisions, 3 German and 1 Italian. The first is General Neumann Cyclo's 15th Panzer Division. This division is located in a position west of Gambut on the 18th of November 1941. It was originally the 33rd Infantry Division, formed in 1936, and had taken part in the French campaign as an infantry division. It was then converted into 15th Panzer Division, losing 2 of its 3 infantry regiments and gaining its Panzer Regiment from 10th Panzer Division, before being sent to North Africa. Neumann Silko, whose mother was Scottish, had commanded 8th Schutzen Brigade in the French campaign of 1940 and had fought in the early battles of the North African campaign. But Crusader would be his last. Neumann Silko is mortally wounded on the 6th of December and doesn't survive Operation Crusader, and therefore is pretty much an unknown figure in the campaign, which is a shame. His division consists of a Panzer Regiment and an infantry brigade. We'll take a look at Oberst-Leutnant Hans Kramer's 8th Panzer Regiment first. Kramer had First World War experience and had taken part in the invasion of Poland, so again, an experienced tank commander. He has quite an important role to play in the Allied D-Day deception campaign later in the war, but that's beyond the scope of this video. Kramer's regiment has 2 battalions, 1st Panzer Battalion and Fensky's 2nd Panzer Battalion. These have roughly 55 panzers each at the start of the battle. The infantry brigade of 15th Panzer Division was Erwin Menney's 15th Schutzen Brigade. Menney was another officer from the First World War, and after his time with 15th Panzer Division would go on to command several divisions, including the 18th Panzer Division. I'm not sure, but it seems Menney ends up in the Valet's pocket as commander of the 84th Infantry Division, which appears to be his last command. Right, I've paused the video. You may have noticed that I've gone out of focus, and the reason for this is because I've had complaints recently that I've been using autofocus on my videos, which means I go out of focus for a few seconds every so often. People don't like this, and have suggested that I use manual focus, so I did. This entire video is in manual focus, and it starts out okay, but it doesn't stay that way, and I'm not sure why. So, because time is the one commodity I do not have in abundance, I cannot go back and reshoot this video, and I promised it would be out this week, so I have no choice but to either continue to show you the rest of the video, which is almost unwatchable, or remove the footage of me, and just hope the rest of the video is entertaining enough on its own. I've chosen to do the former, and I've decided to just use autofocus from now on, because I cannot afford to go back and reshoot the videos in the event this happens again. Sorry for the interruption, sorry for the poor quality video, try to enjoy the rest of it. Now the weird part about Menney's brigade is that it's the only German infantry brigade in North Africa, and only has 1 Schutzen regiment within it. On a whole, German infantry brigades are rare. In fact, the only infantry brigade in the whole of 6th Army prior to the Battle of Stalingrad was Breuch's 24th Schutzen Brigade, so it's unclear how these things fit into the normal order of battle. But even more strange is that Many has just one regiment, so his brigade doesn't even need to exist. The division may as well just command the regiment rather than the brigade. But this setup is just in Operation Crusader, so maybe they were planning on giving him another regiment at some point. During Operation Crusader, Many has Zintel's 115th Schutzen Regiment with 1st and 2nd Battalions, and Major Ely's 15th Motorcycle Battalion. As far as I can tell, this motorcycle battalion was an infantry battalion but had motorcycles rather than trucks for transport. It wasn't the Divisional Reconnaissance Battalion, it was just an infantry unit. So basically, Many's brigade was a regiment, since the regiment only had 2 battalions, not 3, but had 3 with the motorcycle battalion. Which begs the question, why not just put the motorcycle battalion in the regiment and then get rid of the brigade level? And I don't have the answer for that. The other units in 15th Panzer Division were 33rd Artillery Regiment, 33rd Reconnaissance Battalion with armoured cars, 33rd Panzerjäger Battalion, presumably armed with Marders, 33rd Motorised Pioneer Battalion, and 78th Signals Battalion. Obviously, being a Panzer Division in a tank battle, 15th Panzer Division would play a central part in Operation Crusader, but 8th Panzer Regiment would come out of Crusader with barely a dozen panzers left. But it would survive the battle at least. The next division in Cruewell's corps is General Lieutenant von Ravenstein's 21st Panzer Division. This division is located in positions east of Gambut on the 18th of November 1941. Von Ravenstein had fought in the First World War but only rejoined the military in 1934. He took part in the invasion of Poland and France before being appointed the commander of the 5th Light Division, the former name of the 21st Panzer Division. Von Ravenstein has the unfortunate distinction of being the first German general to be captured during the Second World War, and yes, he was captured during Operation Crusader. His ship was sunk by the Luftwaffe as it sailed from Tobruk to Alexandria, but he survived that sinking, and on his way back to Canada on another ship, he led the POWs in a plot to capture the ship and then sail it back to West Africa. The plot failed, and he would spend the rest of the war in a POW camp in Canada. He died of a heart attack as he was giving a speech in a church many years after the war. Von Ravenstein's 21st Panzer Division consists of 3 regiments, the first of which is Colonel Stefan's 5th Panzer Regiment. This is split into 2 panzer battalions, the 1st and 2nd, and has 110 panzers in total at the beginning of the battle. These were 35 Panzer II light tanks, 58 Panzer III medium tanks, and 17 Panzer IV medium tanks. Now, I don't have much information on Stefan, but he forms a Kampfgruppe, or Kampfgruppe Stefan, during the battle, which has around 80 to 90 tanks at the time. He's also killed on the 25th of November, and thus doesn't survive the battle. The 2nd Regiment is Oberst Lieutenant Nabe's 104th Schutzen Regiment. This is known in some British sources as the 104th Lorried Infantry Regiment. But while the HQ was motorised, the infantry battalions, 1st, 2nd and 8th Machine Gun Battalions, had not been provided with trucks. Nabe had been in command of 15th Motorcycle Battalion with 15th Panzer Division before being put in charge of 104th Schutzen Regiment. Now, I am going to have to point out that most sources say that 104th Schutzen Regiment did not have a 1st Battalion. But it must have had a 1st Battalion because that's the battalion that Major Wilhelm Bach surrendered with at Halfaya at the end of the battle. Maybe technically this battalion was taken from the regiment's order of battle and designated a garrison force. Either way though, Bach's battalion had originally been from the 104th Schutzen Regiment, so I'm counting it as it is. Father Bach, an ex-pastor of a church in Mannheim, was a cigar-smoking, cheerful man who walked with a cane as a result of a leg injury from the Great War. Rommel had initially disliked Bach because he looked like a pile of laundry, but Bach had proven himself during Operation Battle Axe, earning Rommel's admiration. Bach's 1st Battalion had been heavily reinforced and was positioned at the Halfaya Pass. It had 5 batteries of anti-tank guns, including 1 battery of 88mm flak guns. Unfortunately for Back, he would be compelled to surrender his force to the British at the end of Operation Crusader, and he will be shipped to Canada as a prisoner of war, where he would die of cancer later in 1942. The other elements of this division were the 155th Artillery Regiment, the 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion, 200th Pioneer Battalion, 200th Signals Battalion, and 39th Panzerjäger Battalion. These 2 divisions were the original 2 divisions that Rommel had been given when he landed in North Africa earlier in 1941. But when he reached Tobruk, he discovered that his mainly tank-orientated force didn't have enough infantry to tackle fortified positions or hold terrain. Not being able to rely on the poorly led Italian divisions, Rommel requested more German infantry. This led to the creation of the 3rd German Division in Cruewell's corps, General Major Max Sudermann's Africa Division. Bit of a weird division, this one, to the point that even its name is disputed. It's either the Africa Division or the 90th Light Division. Now, some sources claim it changed names in November 1941, but other sources say it didn't, with one source saying, regardless of the name change, it always was referred to as the Africa Division by the troops, since it was actually raised in Africa. I don't know, but to keep things simple, I'm just going to refer to it as the Africa Division while Sudermann's in charge of it. The Africa Division is an infantry division with 2 Schutzen regiments. The first is Oberst Michel's 155th Schutzen Regiment, which had actually been formed on the 21st of September 1941 from 3 infantry battalions from other established German regiments. But the 2nd Regiment, Oberst von Barby's 361st Africa Infantry Regiment, was formed by mostly former French Foreign Legionaries of German origin. This had Oberst Lieutenant Harder's 1st Infantry Battalion, Major Ryle's 2nd Infantry Battalion, and the 361st Artillery Battalion. The other elements of the division included 580th Mixed Reconnaissance Company, 605th Panzerjäger Battalion, and Oberst Menton's 288th Sonderverband Special Unit. Menton's Special Unit had been formed on the 24th of July 1941 and was a collection of various supply, pioneer, mountain, signals, infantry, maintenance, medical, laboratory and anti-tank units. The whole division was formed to give Rommel more infantry and to help take Tobruk, which is why it's in a position on the eastern side of the Tobruk defences. Sudermann had commanded a few infantry divisions prior to this assignment, which would be his last, because Sudermann is killed on the 10th of December during an air attack. Supposedly his final words were, "I have a son in Russia." So these are the 3 German divisions in North Africa prior to Crusader. All their leaders would be dead or captured by the end of the battle, and their tank numbers would dwindle to almost nothing. This happened despite the fact that the Germans had a much better armoured doctrine than the British and outfought them in the initial tank clash. The reason they fought better was because Rommel had realised during Operations Brevity and Battle Axe that the best way to defeat enemy armour was not with tanks, but with anti-tank guns. Maximilian von Herf, the former commander of the 115th Schutzen Regiment, had used his panzers to lure the British tanks onto his hidden anti-tank guns, which battered the British into submission during Brevity. Rommel had seen this, and the Germans used those tactics during Battle Axe and Crusader. This was aided by the poor British order of battle, which separated their infantry from their tanks, making them easy prey for the German anti-tank guns. So, what happened then? Why were the German panzer divisions fighting better than the British tanks, but still came hobbling away from Crusader? There's a few reasons for this, and I'll leave this explanation until the main Battlestorm Operation Crusader video, where I can explain it fully. There were, though, other German units in the Africa Corps, with more units at the frontier which surrendered with Back. So I may as well cover these now. Unfortunately, all the sources are super vague when it comes to the frontier forces. The only unit, apart from Back's, that I can confirm was there is Captain of Reserves Ennekeris's 300th Oasis Battalion. This was at Sollum and may have had 5 infantry companies at the time. It may have also been a part of the Africa Division, although it's not listed in its order of battle. One theory is that it was due to expand into a regiment, which may have become the 3rd Regiment of the Africa Division. There were also 2 independent infantry battalions in the Africa Corps, which you never hear about in the narratives, and I have no idea where they are. These are listed in the order of battle for Crusader, but then don't appear in future order of battles, so presumably these may have been part of the frontier force and may have surrendered at the end of Crusader, but I'm not sure. So, we've done the German divisions now. The 4th Division in Cruewell's Corps was General de Gregorcus's 55th Savona Infantry Division. This was stationed at the Egyptian frontier near the Halfaya Pass, supporting and supported by several German units. This division consists of 2 infantry regiments, the 15th and 16th, and 1 artillery regiment, the 12th. It also had the 51st Mixed Engineer Battalion, the attached 4th Genova Battalion, and the 155th Machine Gun Battalion. This division was deployed at the Egyptian frontier, where it surrendered at the end of the battle, along with Major Bach's force. There was also a 900th Pioneer Battalion as well, which completes the Africa Corps' order of battle. So there you go, the German Africa Corps prior to the Operation Crusader. But Rommel had a second corps, General Navarini's 21st Corps. This corps was in the Tobruk area, forming the siege lines and preparing to attack the port. It consisted of 4 Italian divisions, the first being General Stampione's 102nd Trento Motorised Division. This consisted of the 61st Motorised Infantry Regiment with 3 infantry battalions, the 62nd Motorised Infantry Regiment with 3 battalions, and the attached 7th Motorised Bersaglieri Regiment with 2 battalions. The other elements of the division were the 46th Motorised Artillery Regiment, the 51st Mixed Engineer Battalion, and the attached 551st Anti-Tank Battalion. Just to point out that the motorised Trento Division was 80% deficient in transport and therefore was motorised only in name. But it would fight hard to contain the British garrison at Tobruk from breaking out and would be compelled to retreat along with the rest of the Axis army once it was realised that the battle was lost. The next division in 21st Corps was General Gloria's 25th Bologna Semi-Motorised Division. Again, just like the Trento, it wasn't really motorised. It consisted of 2 infantry regiments with 3 battalions each, the 39th and 40th, and 205th Artillery Regiment and the 25th Mixed Engineer Battalion. This division stood directly in the path of the 70th Division's breakout attempt and therefore played an important role in Crusader, keeping the British contained in Tobruk. The division did fight well on the defence but was forced to pull back. It survived Operation Crusader and went on to fight at El Alamein, where it would meet its doom, although it fought really hard there as well. The 3rd Division in 21st Corps was General Zambon's 27th Brescia Semi-Motorised Infantry Division. Again, not really motorised. It had 19th Infantry Regiment, 20th Infantry Regiment, 55th Artillery Regiment and 27th Mixed Engineer Battalion and the 27th Machine Gun Battalion. This division held the western side of the Tobruk defences and it would survive Crusader, go on to fight at Gazala and Mersa Matruh, and got annihilated at El Alamein. The final division of 21st Corps was General Franceschini's 17th Pavia Motorised Division. This division was deployed to the south of Tobruk and was sent in to counterattack the 70th Division's breakout attempt. It has been described as a weak division by some historians, probably because of this attack. During Crusader, it had the 27th and 28th Infantry Regiments, 26th Artillery Regiment, 18th Mixed Engineer Battalion, the attached 5th Light Tank Battalion, and the attached 6th Aosta Battalion. It survived Crusader and fought at El Alamein, where it managed to retreat to Mersa Matruh before being compelled to surrender. So these were the 4 divisions of 21st Corps, but the Italians also had several extra units as part of the Corps to help it tackle the Tobruk siege. These were the 5th Artillery Regiment, 8th Artillery Regiment, 16th Corps Artillery Regiment, 24th Corps Artillery Regiment, 3rd Motorised Artillery Regiment, 304th Frontier Guards Artillery and the 34th Engineer Battalion. I'm not entirely sure where these were deployed because well, they're not mentioned in the narrative. In fact, not a lot is mentioned in the narrative about the Italians because the conflict has traditionally been seen as a German and British affair, with the Italians taking a minor role in the conflict, even though they did play a very important part. The final unit in Rommel's Africa Army was Butcher's 104th Artillery Command Africa. This was a German unit, but wasn't part of the Africa Corps. It was at brigade strength and was nicknamed Rommel's Travelling Circus by the British, mainly because it was an artillery unit. It's basically a Kampfgruppe formed around the 221st Artillery Regiment, which was reinforced with additional batteries, including 2 batteries of French 155mm guns. This unit was there to pummel the British at Tobruk into submission. During Crusader, Butcher would form a Kampfgruppe Butcher, which was his artillery command unit, but also had elements from the Africa Division in there as well. Again, showing the flexibility of the Kampfgruppe doctrine. Butcher would take over the 21st Panzer Division after von Ravenstein was captured, but had to give up his post in mid-February 1942 due to poor health. He would later go on to command several infantry divisions and ultimately survive the war. So that is Rommel's Africa Army. However, Bastico had another corps in Libya as well, which was separate to Rommel's army. This was General di Corpo Diamata Gascon Gambara's mobile 20th Corps. At the beginning of Crusader, this was south of Tobruk and not under Rommel's command. This was done to spite Rommel, as the Italians didn't want him in absolute command. But with Crusader underway, Gambara is replaced by Bastico on the 10th of December, and the formation is placed under Rommel's command at that point. So yeah, Rommel's superior is suddenly taking orders from Rommel. At one point in the battle, Rommel wanted to counterattack the British with the Africa Corps and Gambara's units. Unfortunately, despite Cruewell repeatedly radioing, "Where is Gambara? Where is Gambara?" the Italians never turned up. And as a result of this, the phrase, "Where is Gambara?" became a common quip amongst the German troops. 20th Corps has 2 divisions, the first being General Barlotta's 132nd Areti Armoured Division. This is armed with the Italian M13/40 tanks and is sat in reserve near Bir el Gubi. Despite this, it would be one of the first units to fight the British in Crusader, since Bir el Gubi was sort of on the way towards Tobruk. The Areti consisted of the 32nd Armoured Regiment, 132nd Armoured Regiment, 8th Motorised Bersaglieri Regiment, 132nd Artillery Regiment, 32nd Mixed Engineer Battalion, 3rd Recon Battalion, 3rd Tank Battalion, the attached Milmart Battalion, and the Young Fascist Group. The Areti, and especially the Young Fascist Group, would grapple with the British tanks and the 1st South African Division at Bir el Gubi, doing quite well against them. The division survived Crusader but didn't survive El Alamein. The 2nd Division was General Piazzoni's 101st Trieste Motorised Division. Piazzoni is actually made commander of the 20th Corps on the 20th of December. The Trieste consisted of 65th Motorised Infantry Regiment, 66th Motorised Infantry Regiment, the attached 9th Motorised Bersaglieri Regiment, each with 2 infantry battalions. And it also had the 21st Motorised Artillery Regiment and the attached 508th Mixed Battalion. This division is at Bir Hakeim. It survived Crusader and El Alamein, but would surrender to the Allies in Tunisia in 1943. So this is the initial Axis order of battle for Operation Crusader. Bastico would also receive General Gioda's 10th Corps on the 9th of December, which was given to Rommel, but it doesn't really take part in the fighting, so there's no point going over in detail with it. One thing that needs to be commented on is the fact that the German Panzer Divisions were more balanced than the British forces. 7th Armoured Division had 2 armoured brigades and a mixed support group, basically little to no infantry. Whereas the Germans, if we take 21st Panzer Division for example, had 1 Panzer Regiment and 1 infantry regiment, so 50-50. Not only do the Germans have more infantry in their armoured divisions, but they have a more all-rounded force, with panzers, infantry and anti-tank guns all working well together. This combined arms integration gives the Germans an edge against the British on the tactical level. Now, some have accused me of being pro-British in the past, with regards to my market garden videos especially. Well, here is proof that I'm not. The British botched up their order of battle massively for Operation Crusader, which is mainly the fault of their generals and their inability to flesh out a decent tank doctrine between the wars. And credit where credit is due, the Germans at the very least managed to field a balanced force. That said, I'm not pro-German either. Crusader is an example of a battle where early German tactical successes do not lead to victory, and while the British do have more troops than the Axis, arguably it is actually because of Rommel's operational mistakes, and really the overall Axis strategic situation as well, that was the main reason that the British prevailed. Crusader is a battle where the Desert Fox was simply not on his game, as you will find out in the main Battlestorm Crusader video coming soon. Please check out my British Order of Battle video for Crusader if you haven't done so already, links below. Unfortunately, not being able to read Italian, much of the information I have for the Italians during Operation Crusader comes from internet sources, which really isn't ideal since I've discovered some of these sources are wrong already. Therefore, if you're Italian or can read the Italian history books and you have any information on the Italian generals or their units or their actions during Operation Crusader, please let me know in the comments below. Especially if you have some funny stories or funny facts, because they're always good. If you can back up your points with references, that would be ideal. In the meantime, thank you to my patrons. As always, you guys are awesome. And to the rest of you, thanks for watching. Bye for now.